my name is Colonel Mark Harlan. I'm 45, been in logistics for the Army since I was 21, and I've never once missed a deadline or failed a mission. I've briefed generals at midnight, rerouted convoys midair, and kept entire battalions moving across continents with less than a day's notice. That day, I stood in front of a Pentagon operations committee to present a new strategic logistics model I'd spent 3 years building. This wasn't a backroom brainstorm or a casual update. It was a high-stakes rollout attended by 3-star brass, senior procurement analysts, and the deputy secretary himself. I was walking them through a cost reduction and readiness-boosting plan that could reshape how we deploy supplies in a conflict zone. I was halfway through the model's live forecast integration when the door opened. Ethan walked in like it was his stage. Tailored Navy suit, smug confidence, not a folder in his hand. Just that high-born entitlement some people carry like armor. He didn't sit, didn't wait to be acknowledged. He strolled past me, plucked the remote out of my hand, and started clicking through a slide deck that hadn't been approved or reviewed by anyone in that room. Then he spoke. He called it a streamlined logistics architecture, used phrases like lean-forward resourcing and preemptive route logic. I stood there, still holding my notes, as his voice filled the room. My voice, actually, my structure, my research. Phrases I'd written during months of late-night work while stationed in Kuwait, crammed into a modular office with a flickering overhead bulb and a cot that barely held my weight. No one said a word. Not General Wright, who'd mentored me for years. Not Colonel Paxton, who'd once told me I was the sharpest ops mind he'd seen in a decade. They all just watched as Ethan clicked through slide after slide of stolen work. He didn't stumble once. Every graph, every data point, even the tone of delivery, it was mine, surgically lifted and rehearsed to perfection. And when he closed it out, he said the line I'd used in every dry run. We don't just move supplies, we move certainty. They clapped. Some even nodded like they'd witnessed genius. I felt heat crawl from my collar to my ears. The same people who'd trusted me with classified clearances now couldn't meet my eyes. I gathered my binder, turned off my mic, and walked out without a word. My boots echoed down the corridor like they were shouting for someone to stop me. No one did. Back at my quarters, I sat in the dark with a still mind and a quiet rage. Not at Ethan, not even at the brass who let it happen, but at the system that applauds the suit while ignoring the scars. They took my voice, but they hadn't taken the engine behind it. Not yet. I was born in El Paso, Texas, but I never really stayed in one place long enough to call it home. My dad, Sergeant Daniel Harlan, was a logistics man, a master of getting tanks where they didn't belong and fuel where it shouldn't have reached. When I was 8, he deployed to Bosnia on a support mission and never came back. They never found him. No body, no answers, just a folded flag and a vague explanation about a convoy that went silent outside Tuzla. My mom, Valerie, was a field medic and tougher than most of the men I'd meet later in the Army. She patched people up by day and held our family together by night. She raised me and my sister between base housing and borrowed couches, always on alert for the next move, the next set of orders, the next storm. I learned early how to carry weight that wasn't mine. By the time I was 10, I could load a duffel in 3 minutes flat and tape up a cracked window with Army precision. I watched my mom ration canned beans without looking desperate and soothe combat medics fresh off a dust-off like it was just another Tuesday. Service wasn't a motto in our house. It was breakfast conversation. I never knew childhood in the way other kids did. My playtime was spent sorting gear, decoding the jargon in my dad's old manuals, and shadowing non-coms during unit barbecues like they were rock stars. I saw how systems kept people alive. How a missed delivery could mean a wounded platoon went without blood bags. That kind of math stuck with me. I didn't grow up dreaming of medals. I just wanted to fix the chain that broke when my dad disappeared. I wanted to be the guy who made sure no soldier got stranded because someone miscounted crates. Some kids grow up in neighborhoods. I grew up in movement, in orders, in grit, and I carried that with me into every room I've ever walked into. My first job in the Army wasn't glamorous. I was assigned to inventory control at a remote supply outpost in northern Afghanistan. I counted crates, tracked shipments with a pencil, and slept next to pallets of spare parts in tents that flapped all night in the wind. But I watched everything. I studied how delays stacked up, how small miscalculations led to bigger failures. I started mapping patterns in a battered notebook, noting when units got shorted, where routes broke down, which suppliers delivered late even when paperwork said otherwise. I taught myself how to code by candlelight, running scripts on a refurbished laptop I bought off a departing Marine. While others played cards or watched bootleg movies, I ran simulations. I tested ways to shave hours off delivery chains and restructured how field hospitals got resupplied. No one asked me to. I just wanted the system to work better. Over the years, I moved up sergeant, then lieutenant, then operations chief, but I never stopped building in the margins. My project, the Smart Supply Grid, started as a side hustle, just an idea built from spreadsheets and late-night Python experiments. It predicted shortages before they hit, flagged slowdowns in real time, cut waste without cutting strength. I installed it quietly in 2 remote command centers, labeled it as routine optimization. Within a month, both sites reported supply improvements of over 15%. No fanfare, just fewer shortages, faster response. Word spread, but no one knew who had designed it. I liked it that way. Recognition never drove me. I worked because every improvement meant fewer lives hanging in the balance. I wasn't the guy giving speeches or shaking hands in press briefings. I was the one rerouting supply trucks at 2 a.m. so they wouldn't get stuck in a mudslide no one else had planned for. And for 2 decades, I kept doing the work no one saw, because I believed in it, because someone had to. Ethan arrived straight out of Georgetown's policy school with a polished resume and a last name that unlocked doors. They called him a rising star, said he had vision, said he'd bring fresh energy to defense innovation. Nobody mentioned he'd never set foot in a field op or managed more than a group project. At first, he seemed harmless. He shadowed meetings, scribbled in a leather notebook, asked questions that felt more curious than calculated. He'd linger after briefings, asking how logistics systems scale, how field data gets cleaned, how models prioritize urgency. I answered because that's what you do in uniform. You share knowledge. Then he got bold. Started showing up uninvited to internal work groups. He'd pull me aside with coffee in hand, asking if my routing algorithm could adapt to multinational deployment zones. I figured he was trying to learn, so I broke it down in plain terms. That's when I should have noticed he never asked about the layers, never followed up on technical steps, just wanted the end results. One time, I caught him taking a picture of a flowchart on my whiteboard when he thought I wasn't looking. Said he liked to study visuals. Another time, he repeated a term I'd coined tri-phase bottlenecking in a staff meeting, like it came from his own research. I told myself it was flattery. I told myself he didn't know better. I told myself a lot of things. The shift came quiet. People started asking Ethan for updates on initiatives that came from my desk. He pitched fresh approaches that looked eerily close to concepts I'd been workshopping in private. When I mentioned this to a colleague, he shrugged, said Ethan was just good at packaging ideas. What he meant was Ethan knew how to steal them and smile while doing it. And I had given him the blueprint, one quiet answer at a time. The room was silent, except for the hum of the overhead lights. I stood at the front, pointer in hand, just seconds from explaining the backbone of the Smart Supply Grid to the top brass. Generals, senior analysts, policymakers, all staring, waiting. And then the door opened. Ethan strolled in like he was late to his own show. No folder, no laptop, just that trademark grin and tailored suit. He didn't look at me, just walked up, snatched the remote from my hand, and with one smooth motion, flipped the screen. My slides disappeared. His popped up. He called it the Future Forward Logistics Initiative. Clean graphics, animated models, buzzwords layered over substance. And yet, every single word he spoke was mine. He'd memorized the structure, the language, the cadence. Even my closing line, He delivered it with the same timing I had drilled over weeks of rehearsal. I didn't move. Couldn't speak. My chest was burning, but my face didn't flinch. Around the room, no one interrupted. Not one of the officers I'd worked alongside for years. Not one civilian official who had praised my ingenuity in private. They just watched, nodding occasionally, even taking notes. Ethan clicked through the final slide and closed with a confident smile. They clapped. Some leaned forward as if he'd just solved a national crisis. And I stood there, invisible, erased in real time. Humiliation crept in slow, not like a slap but like sinking into water. I thought about calling him out. Thought about pulling up the time-stamped files, the source code, the drafts only I had. But I saw Ron's face in the crowd, blank, distant, calculating. And I knew then, this wasn't a mistake. This was the plan. I gathered my notes with hands that didn't shake and walked out of that room like I'd finished my piece. No one stopped me. No one called my name. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt truly alone in uniform. Weeks before that briefing room betrayal, I had started to feel the shift, the way Ethan hovered a little too long near my desk. The questions that were just a little too specific. I didn't have hard proof then, but instinct is a survival tool the Army sharpens well. So I made moves, quiet ones. Every line of core logic behind the smart supply grid was backed up to a private, encrypted server in my name. Not a single line was drafted on government machines. Not one model tested on DoD infrastructure. I used my own laptop, my own tools, everything logged, everything time-stamped. I kept a red folder in a locked box under my bed. Inside, notarized development logs, handwritten notes from the early phase, system architecture sketches with dates in the margins. The kind of evidence no briefing room buzzwords could outshine. If Ethan ever tried to run the system, he'd be standing in front of a shell, no engine, just a polished hood with nothing underneath. Because what I built wasn't just a concept, it was a chain of dependencies only I understood. Adjust one variable wrong and the whole thing collapses. He had screen captures, maybe even presentation drafts, but he didn't know the why behind each element. He didn't understand how we handled routing volatility under field pressure, or how phase delay metrics shifted with live weather feed integration. While he was memorizing talking points, I was running field simulations with active duty feedback. I tested the system against blackout scenarios, fake GPS signals, and unreliable comms. I watched it adapt in real time, reshuffling inventory with zero human input. That's not something you steal. That's something you earn by bleeding over a keyboard at 3 a.m. So when I walked out of that briefing room, I didn't feel defeated. I felt ready. Let them clap for a demo that couldn't run. Let them chase after a presentation without a product. I had the core. I had the proof. And more importantly, I had the patience to wait while their house of cards shook in the wind. It took less than 3 minutes for the entire Pentagon demo to fall apart. The lights dimmed, the projector buzzed, and Ethan stepped forward in full confidence. But when he tried to launch the smart supply grid interface, the screen froze. One icon spun endlessly in the corner. Then a red error popped up, system dependency failure. Ethan clicked again, then again. Nothing. From the back, someone whispered. From the front row, a general crossed his arms. The senator, Ethan's father, sat stiff, staring at the screen like he could will it to life. I was across town in a quiet diner, sipping coffee. My phone lit up. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another call. Another. The third was from a deputy director I had briefed months ago. He didn't even say hello. Just asked if I was free to talk, urgently, preferably in person. I said no. Then I heard it, the change in his voice. Not panic, not anger, just uncertainty. The kind that comes when people realize they bet on the wrong horse. He asked what it would take to fix the system. I told him I wasn't sure they had anything I wanted. Later that night, I met with them anyway. Pentagon liaison, 2 aides, and the senator himself. They showed up with folders, with titles, with promises, CTO role, full autonomy, retroactive credit. They even had the nerve to say it was all a misunderstanding, that Ethan had just gotten carried away. I listened. I nodded. Then I said no. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just didn't want to build anything for people who couldn't see value until it was breaking in front of them. Ethan tried to appeal to honor, said we were all on the same side. I looked him in the eye and told him that stealing wasn't service. The senator stepped in then, voice low, words loaded. He hinted at consequences, career suicide, national optics. I let him finish, then handed him a flash drive. Inside were all the files, all the dates, all the dependencies, not for them to use, just to show how deep the roots ran. I told him he could take that to court, to the press, or to his conscience. It made no difference to me. When they left, the table was quiet. My coffee was cold, but I felt warm for the first time in weeks. I hadn't won by shouting, I'd won by refusing to kneel. I rented a dusty old warehouse just outside Richmond. The place smelled like machine oil and paint thinner, but it had space, walls to sketch on, and a roll-up door that let the sun cut through the dust. First came Jordan, a former Marine who ran supply chains in Kandahar like clockwork. Then Sonia, who'd once rerouted an entire relief convoy through Sudan using only satellite maps and radio. I didn't post job listings. I made calls, personal ones. Each desk was a folding table. Chairs didn't match. The whiteboard leaned against a wall because we hadn't bothered to mount it yet. But the first time I saw them gather around it, arguing over supply routes like it was combat prep, I knew this was the team. No titles, no politics, just respect earned through grit. We didn't have an HR department or a snack wall. We had clipboards, Sharpies, and a countdown timer running on an old laptop. We worked in shifts, early, late, whenever. No one needed permission to stay late. We all wanted to. The mission wasn't abstract anymore. It was right there in the data sets and shipping manifests. Sonia brought in her own router and configured the whole network herself. Jordan welded metal racks in the back for gear. I rewrote parts of the smart supply grid to fit our new ops model. It was scrappy. It was uneven. It was beautiful. I hadn't felt this clear in years. We weren't fixing someone else's mess. We were building the system the right way this time. One night, after everyone else left, I stood in the middle of that warehouse and just listened. The hum of machines, the faint squeak of marker on whiteboard, the echo of people who believed in the mission. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt forward motion. Not revenge, not even justice, just momentum, and that was enough. He showed up just after sundown, standing outside the roll-up door like a stray who forgot where home was. Same tailored coat, but it hung loose now, like he'd lost more than weight. His shoes were dusty, eyes tired. I didn't say anything, just opened the door halfway and waited. He stepped forward slow, hands in his pockets, like he was rehearsing humility but didn't know the lines. He said he made mistakes, said he got caught up, said Ron threw him under the bus. I let it hang in the air. The smell of solder and oil did the talking. He asked for a second chance, said he could help, offered to handle outreach or pitch decks or whatever we needed. I looked past him to the empty parking lot. We don't need suits, I said. We need people who know how to patch a failing link at midnight with half a toolkit and no backup. He tried again, softer. Just let me in. I stepped out, closed the distance slow. You don't belong in the field, I told him. You belong in the audience. Then I shut the door. Inside, the team didn't ask what that was about. They didn't need to. The silence meant more than any applause. It was the sound of standards being kept. And as I walked back toward the whiteboard, I felt lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I didn't have to carry his weight anymore. The contract came in on a Tuesday morning. Quiet email, no celebration. Just a subject line that read, "Green light approved." I stared at it a minute, then forwarded it to the team with one word, "Go." We didn't cheer. We didn't even slow down. Just tightened our timelines and recalibrated the build. Our work was finally seen, finally valued, but we were too deep in the doing to step back and admire it. A few days later, someone floated the idea of buying back the old project. Said the bones were still good. Said we could salvage something. I didn't even blink. Let it die. What we had now wasn't born from recovery. It was built clean. I stood that afternoon with Zara and Leo near the bay doors. Cold air coming in through the cracks, floor scuffed from gear wheels and boot tracks. The kind of place that earned its noise. Dust in the corners, coffee stains on blueprints, real work. We watched the crew wire up a new board. No handbooks, just knowledge passed from hand to hand. No speeches, just people who'd bled in silence and showed up again anyway. Someone asked if I felt vindicated. I said no. I felt ready. Vindication is for people who need to prove something. I'm done proving. As the sun hit the top of the warehouse wall, I took a breath and looked around. No polished floors, no corner office, just four walls and forward motion. And that was enough. Storms always pass. What matters is what you build right.